Picture this. You are a 12-year-old boy swimming in the crystal blue waters of the Bay of Naples in the year 34 AD. The Mediterranean sun warms your back as you dive for seashells, your lungs burning as you hold your breath longer and longer, competing with your younger brother to see who can stay underwater the longest. Your father watches proudly from his boat as you surface with a handful of perfect shells, your dark hair slicked back and your chest heaving. This is your world, simple, honest, filled with laughter and the endless rhythm of waves. Then you see them, 3 imperial galleys, cutting through the water like knives, their purple sails bearing the golden eagle of Rome. Your father's face goes white as parchment. Everyone in your village knows what those ships mean. The Emperor Tiberius is collecting again. What you don't know is that your exceptional swimming ability has just sealed your fate. The soldiers have been watching you for weeks, taking notes on how long you can hold your breath, how gracefully you move through the water. You don't know that tomorrow you will wake up in a marble chamber on a distant island, surrounded by other boys who once had families, once had names. You don't know that your swimming skills will become the tools of your own destruction. By sunset tonight, the boy who collected shells will begin to disappear. In his place, something else will emerge. One of Tiberius's little fishes, trained to serve the emperor's most twisted appetites in ways that would make the gods weep. You are about to become a minnow in the private pools of the most powerful man on earth, and the horrors that await you on Capri will haunt you until your dying breath. But this nightmare gets worse, much worse. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. Tiberius Julius Caesar Augustus wasn't born a monster. When he became emperor in 14 AD, Romans believed they were witnessing a golden age. He was intelligent, experienced, faithful, but absolute power reveals the darkness in even the most promising souls. And by 30 AD, something fundamental had broken inside the emperor's mind. The transformation began when Tiberius Julius Caesar Augustus abandoned Rome, entirely retreating to Capri with a small circle of servants. Officially, this withdrawal was temporary, a chance to recover his health. In reality, it was the beginning of history's most systematic program of child abuse, carried out in marble palaces surrounded by azure waters that became hell on earth. Capri was perfect for Tiberius's dark transformation. The island sits 12 miles from the Italian coast, surrounded by treacherous currents and towering cliffs that make escape impossible. Ships could only approach during calm weather, and every vessel was monitored by imperial guards. What happened on Capri stayed on Capri. The emperor's villa covered much of the island's highest plateau, a sprawling complex of chambers, gardens, and most importantly, private pools carved directly into living rock. These weren't simple bathing facilities. They were engineering marvels designed to facilitate activities that architects understood but never discussed. The pools varied in depth and temperature, some shallow enough for children to stand in, others deep enough for extended underwater activities. Underground chambers connected them, creating aquatic spaces where screams couldn't carry beyond marble walls. But here's the part that will make your skin crawl. This wasn't random cruelty. This was systematic, calculated, industrial-scale child abuse, disguised as imperial privilege. The emperor had discovered he derived particular pleasure from having young boys perform intimate acts on him while he bathed, specifically boys who could hold their breath for extended periods underwater. What started as occasional indulgence evolved into an obsession that consumed enormous resources and countless young lives. The selection process was methodical and horrifying. Imperial agents traveled coastal regions, ostensibly on administrative business, but actually scouting for boys with exceptional swimming abilities. They watched fishing villages, monitored harbors, and paid attention to children who spent hours in water. The criteria were specific: boys between 8 and 14, physically attractive, capable of holding their breath for at least 2 minutes. Those who met these requirements found their names added to special lists forwarded directly to Capri. The collection process followed a pattern across dozens of coastal communities. Imperial ships arrived without warning, crews armed with official documents giving them authority to conscript children for imperial service. Parents who resisted faced immediate arrest or execution. Those who cooperated received small payments that barely compensated for losing their children. Your own capture followed this routine. Soldiers boarded your father's boat, speaking officially about imperial service and advancement opportunities, but their eyes held coldness that made your stomach clench. They examined you like slave traders, testing reflexes, checking teeth, timing how long you could hold your breath underwater. When you stayed submerged for nearly 3 minutes, retrieving a coin from the depths, their smiles became genuine. And that's when you knew you were exactly what they were looking for. The journey to Capri took 2 days aboard ships equipped for transporting children. You were crowded into cargo holds with dozens of other boys, all sharing the same look of terrified confusion. Some cried constantly. Others sat in stunned silence. The older boys whispered about marble pools where children performed tasks that made no sense to innocent minds. They spoke of boys who pleased the emperor and received better treatment, but they also mentioned others who displeased him and simply disappeared. The first sight of Capri should have been beautiful. The island rose like an emerald jewel, cliffs crowned with gleaming villa complexes. But as your ship approached, you noticed details that turned wonder into dread. Heavily guarded docks, watchtowers observing every approach, no vessels except imperial craft, people moving with careful precision of those constantly watched. Upon arrival, you underwent a second, more thorough selection. Imperial physicians examined each boy individually, testing swimming ability, flexibility, breath control, and what they called appropriateness for specialized service. Those who passed received clean tunics and an escort to villa quarters. Those who didn't simply vanished. Their screams were never heard again. The villa complex became your prison, a masterpiece of perverted architecture where every detail facilitated the emperor's appetites while maintaining imperial grandeur. You were housed in dormitories near the main pool complex, marble chambers with narrow beds that might have been comfortable under different circumstances. The walls displayed beautiful frescoes depicting sea nymphs and ocean gods, images that later became sources of bitter irony. Your first night, you lay awake, listening to sounds that became the soundtrack of captivity. Gentle splashing from nearby pools mixed with softer sounds your young mind couldn't identify. Older boys moved quietly between beds, whispering urgent instructions about rules that meant the difference between survival and disappearance. You learned silence was golden, questions dangerous, and the emperor's moods determined whether days brought horror or tedium. But nothing could prepare you for what came next. Training began immediately. You were assigned to Marcus, a boy claiming 15, but whose eyes suggested decades of experience. He had survived 3 years on Capri by developing a supernatural ability to anticipate imperial desires. Marcus explained basic rules in whispered conversations. Never speak unless spoken to. Never look the emperor directly in the eyes. Never refuse any request. And most importantly, never stop swimming practice, because your life depended on aquatic skills. The pools were marvels of engineering, perverted into instruments of abuse. The main bathing area featured connected pools at different depths, with underwater passages allowing swimmers to move between them without surfacing. Water was kept at controlled temperatures, warm enough for comfort, but not so hot as to sap the strength needed for extended underwater activities. Marble steps and platforms were carved at specific intervals, creating spaces where the emperor positioned himself while boys swam around and beneath him. But the specialized training revealed the true purpose. You were taught to hold your breath for increasingly longer periods, eventually working up to 5 minutes of continuous submersion. You learn to swim silently, moving without creating splashes that might displease the emperor. Most horrifying, you were instructed in techniques no child should know, ways to use your mouth and hands while underwater for purposes you were too young to understand. The innocence of childhood was being surgically removed from your soul, one lesson at a time. The first time you were summoned to serve personally, you thought you might die from terror. Tiberius reclined on a marble platform, jutting into the main pool, his aging body supported by silk cushions while steam rose from heated water. He looked like a bloated spider in an elaborate web, eyes calculating and predatory as they examined boys selected for his afternoon entertainment. Marcus had prepared you during weeks of whispered instructions, but nothing readied you for Tiberius's presence. The emperor spoke in cultured soft tones, almost grandfatherly, as he explained what he expected from his little fishes. You were to swim in patterns around his submerged body, diving and surfacing rhythmically while he bathed. Occasionally, he gave specific instructions requiring you to swim closer, to use hands or mouth in ways that felt wrong, but you dared not refuse. Your childhood was drowning in those marble pools, one breath at a time. The psychological manipulation was systematic and cruel. Tiberius had perfected techniques for breaking down young minds, replacing natural revulsion with desperate gratitude for approval. Boys who performed well received better food, warmer clothing, and praise that felt precious in your isolated world. Those showing reluctance faced punishments ranging from reduced rations to complete isolation in underground chambers where dripping water became torture. What made abuse particularly insidious was its integration into broader imperial service that seemed almost normal. You had lessons in reading, writing, instruction in literature, training, and crafts that might have qualified as education under different circumstances. The emperor himself sometimes conducted lessons, displaying genuine intelligence and sophistication that made his other activities more horrifying. By contrast, the other boys represented every stage of systematic innocence destruction. Newcomers arrived regularly, their terror serving as reminders of what you'd been. Veterans like Marcus navigated the system with calculating efficiency, trading soul pieces for survival advantages. Scattered throughout were broken ones, boys who'd survived too long and seen too much, minds retreating into protective shells that made them barely human. Lucius had been on Capri for 4 years when you arrived. He barely spoke anymore, moving through routines with mechanical precision, while his eyes remained focused on distant points no one else could see. During your second month, you watched him simply stop eating, refusing food until his body gave out. Other boys understood this as escape, perhaps the only one available to those who could no longer endure. Death had become mercy in Tiberius's paradise. As months turned to years, you understood the complete system Tiberius had created. The villa wasn't just a retreat or pleasure palace. It was a carefully designed machine for systematic child abuse, operating with the efficiency of any imperial institution. Every detail served a purpose, from architectural layout, preventing escape, to staff hierarchies, ensuring absolute secrecy. The emperor maintained detailed records of his little fishes, documenting physical development, swimming abilities, and what he called service aptitude. These records, kept by scribes who'd graduated from the program years earlier, tracked every boy from arrival to disposal. You realized with growing horror that you weren't just a victim, but an entry in an administrative system operating for years with no signs of ending. You were livestock, human inventory, a breathing toy in the emperor's collection. Seasonal rhythms followed patterns you learned to dread. Summer brought the busiest periods when calm seas made travel easier and imperial appetite seemed strongest. New boys arrived regularly while older ones disappeared. Just as frequently, dormitory places filled before beds grew cold. Winter brought relative respite with fewer arrivals but longer, more intense sessions as the emperor spent more time indoors. Your survival depended on a careful balance between compliance and self-preservation that exhausted you mentally and physically. You learned to read imperial moods from subtle signs, adjusting behavior to minimize punishment risk, while maintaining swimming skills that kept you valuable. When Tiberius was benevolent, usually after good news from Rome, pool sessions might involve nothing more than swimming demonstrations. But when political problems arose or health deteriorated, demands became extreme and dangerous. The emperor's aging body created its own survival challenges. Tiberius was now in his 70s, and physical limitations meant some activities he'd enjoyed were no longer possible. This should have provided relief, but instead led to longer sessions, as he struggled to achieve satisfaction that once came easily. Boys were expected to compensate for declining virility with increased effort and creativity, requirements pushing many beyond physical and psychological limits. Most disturbing was how completely normal this systematic abuse had become within the villa's isolated world. Staff members spoke about imperial recreational needs. With professional detachment, they might discuss dietary requirements. The boys developed internal hierarchies and survival strategies, creating a miniature society where exploitation was simply another daily challenge to navigate. By your third year, you'd witness cycles of horror that would have destroyed stronger minds. You'd seen boys arrive full of hope and fear, watched them learn survival rules, observed gradual transformation into hollow shells moving through days like sleepwalkers. Some adapted completely, becoming enthusiastic participants in their own exploitation for small privileges and safety illusions. Others broke entirely, retreating into madness or choosing death over continued degradation. The emperor himself was declining rapidly, body failing even as appetites remained demanding. Tiberius had developed skin conditions making physical contact painful, breathing problems limiting his time in heated pools, and digestive issues leaving him weak and irritable. But rather than reducing demands on boys, these health problems seemed to intensify his need for activities that had defined his Capri years. Marcus, your mentor and protector, finally reached his breaking point during the spring of your third year. He'd survived longer than almost any other boy, using intelligence and adaptability to navigate 5 years of systematic abuse. But something snapped when he was forced to participate in an especially degrading session involving multiple boys lasting nearly an entire day. That night, he slipped away and threw himself from the cliffs surrounding the villa complex. His death marked a turning point in your psychological development. You realized survival wasn't really survival if it meant becoming something no longer recognizably human. The boy who'd collected shells in Naples Bay was already dead, replaced by a creature whose existence revolved around serving twisted imperial appetites. The question wasn't whether you'd die on Capri, but whether you'd die as yourself or as the thing you were becoming. What makes this story chilling is how thoroughly Roman historians documented it after witnessing Tiberius's reign aftermath. Suetonius, writing in The Lives of the 12 Caesars, provided detailed accounts of what he discovered on Capri after the emperor's death. His descriptions, while sometimes euphemistic, leave no doubt about the systematic abuse that occurred there. On retiring to Capri, Suetonius wrote, he devised a pleasantry for his secret orgies. Teams of wantons of both sexes selected as experts in deviant intercourse, whom he called spintry, would perform before him in triple unions to excite his flagging passions. Even more specifically, Suetonius documented the practices you and other boys endured. He furthermore trained little boys, whom he termed as little fishes, to crawl between his thighs when he went swimming and tease him with their licks and nibbles. And he would have babies not yet weaned taken from their mother's breasts to suck his member. These aren't scandal-mongering inventions written centuries later. They are contemporary accounts by respected chroniclers with access to witnesses, official records, and physical evidence from Capri itself. The villa complex still exists today, and visitors can see the pools and chambers where these activities occurred, though tour guides rarely mention their original purposes. When Tiberius died in 37 AD, possibly murdered by his own Praetorian Guard commander, the villa was immediately sealed and its secrets buried. Boys who survived found themselves in impossible situations, witnesses to crimes no one wanted to acknowledge, trained for purposes making them unsuitable for normal life, psychologically damaged in ways that would never heal. Some were quietly relocated to other facilities, their fates unrecorded. Others simply disappeared, perhaps killed, to prevent embarrassing stories. A few may have attempted returning to original families, but after years on Capri, they would have been unrecognizable to parents who'd given them up for dead. Your own fate, like most of Tiberius's little fishes, remains unknown to history. You exist only as a representative of countless children who suffered and died to satisfy one man's twisted appetites. Your individual story is lost among broader chronicles that ancient historians considered more worthy of preservation. But your suffering was real, your fear genuine, and your destruction absolute. The pools of Capri still reflect Mediterranean sun, their marble surfaces now hosting tourists who admire Roman engineering and artistry. But the water remembers what history prefers to forget. Cries of children never meant to surface again, desperate gasps of boys, learning to hold their breath until their lungs burned, splash of small bodies discarded when no longer useful. In the end, Tiberius's legacy isn't just political and military achievements filling history books. It's the systematic destruction of innocent lives, the transformation of imperial power into a machine for consuming children, and the reminder that absolute authority can corrupt even civilized societies in ways that defy imagination. The boy collecting shells in Naples Bay deserved better than becoming a footnote in a dying emperor's fantasies. But history rarely protects the innocent from the appetites of the powerful. The island paradise became a monument to human cruelty, and the little fishes swam in pools of their own tears, until the day they finally stopped swimming altogether. If this glimpse into history's hidden darkness has left you wanting to uncover more buried truths, I've prepared another journey into the shadows of the past that you won't want to miss. Click on the video appearing on your screen now to discover another shocking chapter that history tried to erase. And if you found this exploration as compelling as I did, hit that subscribe button so we can continue peeling back the layers of history together. These forgotten voices deserve to be heard, and there are so many more stories waiting to be told.